dishwater there, and she just made her dishwater, washed it, and put it away.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like a lot of people when they get through cooking, they got all these pots and pans and stuff got to clean and throw and do.
Mm-hmm.
They don't put water in them or anything, and then they get hard, and then they got to scrape them because this little grit pot was pretty. He had cold water in it, but I put some hot, and I finally got everything straightened out in there. Lillian is the oldest one I know.
Okay. I know for Friday, I was thinking for the longest time that the picture taken in 1925, but you mentioned it was in 24.
It was 1924. That's when the portrait was taken.
Okay.
1924.
Okay. And was that just a moment when George and Laura had decided, or either or decided, hey, we need a group picture, or was that from...
I think so, because Dad always kind of liked a group picture. I think this was a group picture that was taken at this time that he wanted for the family.
Okay.
It's a group picture of the family at that time.
Okay. Where...
There were 11 siblings at that time.
Mm-hmm. Were there any other pictures that you're aware of that were taken prior to that moment?
No, this is the only picture that I know of.
Oh man. And so how would you describe I guess just a typical day or week with the family as best as you can remember?
Well, it must have been on maybe a Saturday or Sunday because of how they are dressed.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dress for the boys at that time, when they were dressed, they wore those types of, suits and things.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it might have been taken on a Sunday or a Saturday special time when someone was able to come out and take this portrait.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so where did George and Laura, they were both from the Carolinas?
George was from North Carolina.
Okay.
Somewhere near Raleigh,
Okay.
North Carolina.
Okay.
Laura's parents came from South Carolina, York, South Carolina, near Charleston, South Carolina.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And how can you recall, or was there mentioned on how they met? Was it?
No, they met after they came to Arkansas. I understand that my father was about 9 years old when he came with his parents to Arkansas.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, and I'm sure they must have been here before that time. And they met after they came here.
Okay.
Came to Arkansas.
Oh, okay. Oh, wow. And so they met, and did they meet in Marlton, or was it a different town and they eventually moved to Marlton?
Evidently they met in Marlton.
Okay.
That was the name of the town, Marlton, but we lived in a community, 4.5 miles away from town.
Okay.
And my mother lived, it was all in the same community, but the locations of where they lived was kind of divided, and they were called different locations, but they were all in the same community. My mother lived it was in the same community, but they called that the Ridge. That's where she lived, on the Ridge.
Mm-hmm.
And we lived near the community, but we did not live in that community. We were at the Frog Levee community, Frog Levee community. The community was called the Hickory Hill community.
Right, once they got married, were they, you know, by themselves for a few years, or was it after a little while when they started having their children? Or?
They started having their children.
How would you describe, if you can remember, Ethel's personality or behavior? Or was she?
I was so small, I don't remember, but she was not married at the time that this portrait was taken. I think she may have been the first sibling that got married. She married in 1927.
Okay.
And I was just only a little girl. I don't know whether I could walk, or maybe I could walk, but I don't remember her wedding.
Okay.
She was always kind of quiet.
Oops. Sorry. Okay. And she was the oldest of everyone?
No, she was not the oldest. She was she was the fourth child of the family.
So we're going to move from our left to the next person to the right, Roosevelt. And
Roosevelt was a twin.
Okay.
The twins were the second born children.
Do you recall how they were? How they were, as their personalities? Were they introverted, or were they outgoing, or
Roosevelt was more or less introvert. Yeah, he didn't talk too much.
Okay.
And I understand when the twins were growing up, they would have arguments and get in little fights, but nothing serious.
Okay. I know I vaguely, actually a little bit more than vague, but when we were small, our mother would take us to visit both Uncle Theodore and Uncle Roosevelt. And was Uncle Roosevelt, was he the one that, or at least when we were small, I don't know, 4 or 5, maybe a little younger, was he the one, I can't remember who was still living with their wife then. Was that the Uncle Theodore who lived in town? Up on the hill?
No, that was Roosevelt.
Okay, Roosevelt. Okay, Roosevelt and his wife lived in town. They were up on the hill. Okay. And so Roosevelt was, you were saying, was more of the quiet one?
Yes.
Okay.
Theodore was more outgoing and more talkative.
So moving on to Laura, the mother, how would you describe her as
she was,
or is there any moment that you can remember that was either funny moment or a loving moment, or
I know, well, she was the one that took care of the household for the most part, and helped in the fields also. And she was more of she had a beautiful voice, and she was a member of a trio that they would practice at our home, and then they would sing in different places in the community.
Okay.
Her brother Springs and Dennis Parker. Roosevelt also was a small farmer, and he would always have a lot of children. Children really loved him, and he had a wagon and horses, and when he would come out to visit my father and mother, he would always have a lot of 2 or 3 children with them. Didn't matter what nationality they were.
Mm-hmm.
He had them with him, and they all loved him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
He never had children of his own.
Feel free as we sort of remember each person. Feel free to go if you happen to remember something about any one of them that we haven't mentioned, or if you want to go back through. So there I'm panning to the right, and there is Laura. So
she was always working very hard and working in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
As if, yeah. Okay. And a lot of times she had problems with her legs, and sometimes when she was out working, a vein might burst on her leg, and they would have to come and take her home in a wheelbarrow.
Oh, wow. A wheelbarrow?
Oh,
man.
You know, the little wheelbarrows that they used.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They would come and pick her up.
Okay. Yeah, those.
She had, I guess, very dry skin. She may have had some type of disease at that time. And during that time, people didn't have all of the skin luxuries and lotions and things that we have today. So a lot of the people never put anything on their skin unless it was something from, lard or something like that, which they got from killing of the hogs and stuff that they had.
Mm-hmm. So
people had kind of very dry skin at that time, and it could have been at that time she could have had Sjogren's, and it was never detected.
And so how far from when she was in the field to when they would have to pick up in the wheelbarrow, how far of a ride would you say? Would they take her back home, or did they?
Yeah, they would take her back home.
Okay.
Take her back home. Because at that time, doctors were very scarce, and people didn't have money to take people to the doctor, so they would take home and do home remedies.
So let's go ahead and again, we're going to move on to George. Go ahead.
And my mother passed away in 1936.
Okay.
And I think she was at the age of 55 when she passed.
Okay.
But she seemed to have developed as they used to call senile, because people could not remember, and she developed something like Alzheimer's.
Okay.
And it just progressed for about 2 or 3 years, and it progressed, and she passed away January the 4th in 1935. That's when she passed. That's 36.
Okay. Can you recall when George and Laura had their first child or firstborn?
Let me see. They may have married in 1901.
Okay.
Or 1902. Somewhere in that area.
Okay. And then maybe soon after had their firstborn, you would say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Whom that was? You mentioned that was that Ethel?
That was Lillian.
Lillian.
Yeah, she's the firstborn.
Okay.
And then came the twins.
Okay, yes. Mm-hmm. Moving to the right of George Lewis, we have Lillian.
Lillian was the firstborn.
Okay. And how was she as an older sister, or the eldest sister, and and the eldest.
I don't remember her growing up very much, but the only times I remember her after she went to school, she got a. And at that time, when you finished high school, you could get a job of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Or not high school. If you finished about 7th or 8th grade, you could have a job of teaching. And all of my years is that I remember about is her teaching.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to different communities and taught. And when she came home, she was kind of like guest.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
She didn't like a lot of noise. She wanted to rest.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. But she helped my father a lot financially,
Mm-hmm. I think my mother may have mentioned that, her teaching.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she taught school.
Okay.
And then when she retired, in later years, she went back to school and went to college and stuff. And she taught at different places. And after she married, she got a job teaching in the community in which she married. Mm-hmm. And she taught in that community until she retired. Mm-hmm. In her, I guess in her 60s, whatever time that they had to require that you retire from teaching. Now my father, he was a handicap. Mm-hmm. And he in his younger years, I did not remember because he had only one leg when I was born.
Okay.
I think it was during the time the twins were born in the early maybe 3 or 4, that he was working in a hauling. They were hauling logs and stuff, and he was working, and he tried to. There was usually little trains or trolleys would always go through the woods, and he was with a group of people who lived in the camps and worked in the in the woods. Mm-hmm. After this was his second job after trying to do his own farm and stuff. So mm-hmm. He tried to catch on the train, and his foot slipped, and it ran over his toes or over his feet. But he tried to use home remedies and things, but it did not help, and it set up I guess gangrene, and they had to take his leg off.
Wow. So
and I already remembered him as having only one leg. He made his own leg. They called it a peg at that time.
Okay.
It was made from wood, and he used that all of his life. He never got an artificial leg. Mm-hmm. But he was an overseer. He was a good manager. Mm-hmm. And at one time, someone wanted him to come to California to be an overseer of his ranch. Mm-hmm. Some white person, but I don't remember. But my mother did not want to come, so I don't know what part of California that would have been. But he was a very good overseer and a very good manager. Mm. And we didn't have everything we wanted, but we had everything we needed.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. That's something that I'm just now becoming aware of, that he was offered work in California. Were you living at the time, or had they?
No, it was handed down to me, from my sisters and brothers. No, yes. This was very early. Mm-hmm. In the early 1900s, about 3 or 4, okay. 1900, 3 or 4 sometime, that this man knew him well, and wanted him to come to California and be an overseer of his orange grove that he had bought here. I don't know where.
Oh.
But my mother did not want to come, so he didn't come.
Yes. And if I can recall, we're Burbank in here in California, where that is situated. That was before all the buildings and the movie studios. Those were fruit groves and farm groves.
Yes, those were fruit groves and farm groves and all of that.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
So that possibly interesting how you can think of how lives might have turned out differently. But
yeah.
And next, on the top row, we have Alethea. I'm going to zoom in. So if you can make her face out.
Yes.
Okay. And at what, where within the family was Alethea born? Was she
She was the fifth child.
the fifth child?
Yeah.
So you have...
I had my oldest sister, then the set of twins.
Mm-hmm.
Ethel, and she was the next child.
Okay.
And she always had, I'm sure I knew nothing about her growing up, but I was not born at that time, that she had a beautiful personality from what she had when I grew up a little bit and remembered her. It was always her oldest child was I was about 5 years older than her oldest child.
Okay.
Yeah, she taught school also for a while.
Okay.
And then she married Eugene Parker, and they had one child, named Stanley Parker, Stanley Tennyson Parker.
Mm-hmm.
And but when she would come and visit, I was always happy to see her. And that was the way the rest of her life. She was I don't know, she was just like an angel on earth. Okay. Everybody in the family depended on her. When something happened, they would all want to see her. And it looks like as long as she was there was just love, just vibed from her, vibed all around. She made all of the grandchildren, even up until she died, made all of them feel special. Mm-hmm. All of the nieces and nephews on Olathe made her feel very special. Mm. And I remember when she passed, I don't remember the date she passed, but she was around 66 when she passed. And I would, I went to visit her, just to see her after the viewing. And yes. I could just sit there. There was a calmness and a happiness that I could just sit and just watch her. It wasn't any sadness or anything. I could just sit there for hours and just watch her. There was a calmness and there was love.
Okay. She seemed like very
everybody
festive.
Knew her. Everybody, all of the nieces and nephews knew Anna Lather. Just the ones that were very born these last few years after she passed that did not know her. Mm-hmm. But all of the others knew her, and all of them felt the same way. Mm-hmm. That she was very special, and she made them feel like they were the special one.
Okay. Number one.
She was number one. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, man.
She was like to me, she was just like an angel on earth. God sent her down here on earth. And she was, because a lot of, when I was growing up, I had strep throat a lot. And she would come over, and at that time you had something that you could goggle your throat with, and kids had tonsillitis a lot, and there was something you could goggle your throat with, and when she would come over and goggle my throat, I was fine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She was my doctor too.
Can you briefly mention Aunt Geneva? Because I'm as you're recalling these moments, there were a few of the family members that I remember when I was small. And I remember at the time Aunt Geneva was she was one of the eldest of the family at the time. But
Aunt Geneva was my father's half sister.
oh, okay.
And she grew up, that was the only aunt, and that was the only aunt. She and Aunt Mary were the only aunts that I knew.
Okay.
Yeah. And she would often come up and visit us.
Okay.
And so, yeah,
Oh, wow.
we'd look forward for her coming.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she'd bring us a little candy and stuff like that. We were always happy to see her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. And excuse me.
She was the youngest in her family.
Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. And so that was George Lewis's half sister.
Yes, half sister.
Okay. 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 And
but at that time we never knew, we never knew too much. We just felt, we didn't know that was his half sister at that time. I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought it was his whole sister, but I guess I was not thinking because my grandmother had married a long time, and my father grew up under his stepfather.
Okay.
And I knew that they had a different name, but I never realized, I just thought it was his whole sister. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Okay. When did George Lewis and Laura pass?
Laura, she passed in 1935.
Okay.
And my father passed in 1974.
Okay. And
after her passing, he married another lady.
Okay.
Because he had all of the kids there, and he needed someone to help him. Because he'd been married all the life and had 11. He had 12 kids at that time, so
mm-hmm.
some of my sisters and brothers were married, and then there were some still at home.
Mm.
So he married a lady from the community,
mm-hmm.
and her name was Willie Reed Stewart.
Okay.
She had children of her own, but he married her.
Okay.
Her maiden name was Reed.
Okay, Reed. Okay. We're going to go ahead and move. And once again, as you recall moments, feel free to continue with those we've mentioned or jump ahead to other members. But I'll just move, I'm just position the screen. Now we have Theodore.
Yes.
Okay. And so...
He was a farmer.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And he lived away from the town area of Malta?
Yes, he lived away from the town area in the Spring Valley community.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So where the town is now, the way it's situated, would you say he lived north outside of town or east, or whereas Roosevelt lived in town up on the hill, you might say?
He lived in town up on the hill.
Okay. And
let's see, I would think it would be east.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it would be east.
Okay, because I can.
I know where he lives, but it was back. He lived back toward Plummerville,
Okay.
Arkansas.
Okay.
off Highway 9, and we lived off Highway 95.
Okay. Yeah, I remember when we were small, visiting both uncles. Of course, I remember Roosevelt being up on the hill, and I remember when visiting Uncle Theodore. I just remember it being like in a country-like area, or a grass area, and then his house. There was a little bit of somewhat of a spread. I mean, like there's his grass and everything, and a moderate-sized house.
Yeah. And he had no children, he and his wife.
Mm.
He married Ruth Henson, but they had no children. But they raised 4 of the great children, 4 great nieces and nephews.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because the father was my sister-in-law's nephew, and accidentally trying to travel to Kansas City, he had an accident and was killed, and so they took the children.
Oh. Okay. That's sad to hear. Theodore was more of the outgoing? Or?
Yes, he was the more talkative one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. We're gonna continue, and I'll just keep reminding as we go through. Feel free to jump back and forth to others.
Okay.
So I'm panning back over to the left side. I'm gonna scroll down. Okay, and so here we have this. At the moment, this young gentleman is Cullen.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's see here. Position is properly. Okay. And so how would you describe Uncle Cullen? Or at least my uncle.
Yeah. I describe him from what I can understand when he was a little boy. He was very mischievous, and he'd throw things at the girls, Ethel and Aletha. He was the next after he was born, the next one born after Aletha.
Mm-hmm.
And he things that they would try to make him do right, because he was always getting into stuff and trying to help my mother with him. Then he'd get angry with them, and one of those little things, what he said, when my father went to town once a week, we just lived 4 miles away, and he raised most of all the things that he needed, food and everything. There were some little few things he had to go into town for. And he made the motion that when his father left, that he was going to get Lillian and Aletha. Because they tried to keep him in line. They were his boss, trying to help my mother, and he didn't like that.
He seemed like he was a little rascal.
Yeah, he was a little rascal.
Okay.
Always was.
Oh man. I remember when we were, for a little while, when Ethel was living in Conway, Uncle Cullen, I can't recall his wife's name. Irene, that's right. They lived on the same street, not too far down, not too far, just south of them, of Ethel. So, oh man. And I recall Uncle Cullen and Aunt Irene having those old, at least the clocks with the cats, the cat face. Was it a clock? It wasn't I think it was a clock where it would tick tock and the tail would move, or
every hour.
Yeah.
Tail would move every hour, and it would ring every hour to tell you what time it was.
Yeah, I remember our mother would take us. We would spend time with Aunt Ethel, and we would spend, I would say, more time with Aunt Ethel, but we would always, we would visit Uncle Cullen and Aunt Irene. Yeah. Being that I have some memory of Aunt Irene, I'm just going off track just a little bit, but how would you describe your time with her or around her?
Irene?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, she was kind of a more, I guess, elite person. She was a music teacher at the high school in Conway, Conway, Arkansas, and she was a music teacher. And she was always very polite and going places and doing different things, Where the other sister-in-laws, they would just come in and it was just like sister. But you kind of had to, I guess, kind of handle her a little different, She was a little different, Because I guess she grew up with her mother and father and just a brother, and she didn't have all these sisters and brothers and things to be around. Yeah, mother and father ran a little neighborhood store. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Aunt Irene's mother and father. Was that store in Conway?
Yeah, it was in Conway. It was on the same, it was in Conway. It was next to their home.
Oh, wow.
Where Cullen and Irene were living. That all of that property was, Irene's father and mother's property, and then when they passed, they willed it to Irene and Cullen, because there was a store, and then there were several little homes there that they owned, and they were renting them, small homes. When
I was back a few weeks ago, my mother and I, we drove past, that's situated right at the UCA campus, Hendricks campus, and they were, we drove past where Aunt Ethel's house used to be.
Yes,
And we went south down that road and past Aunt Irene's, and then Mama had mentioned, I was never aware, but she mentioned that they had owned that land and several houses, and I remember seeing that store that you just mentioned.
Yeah, it was next door to the house going downtown. They were close to downtown Conway at that time, but the store was next door to their home, and then on the other side of that there were, I think there were, at that time I remember there were about 3 little houses.
Okay.
Small places, maybe 1-bedroom place, and then they were, in a row on the same side.
Okay. The store was on the corner, right? Or was it near the
right? Yeah, right in there somewhere. I
don't
remember because
I only became aware of that just as you're now confirming it. I remember seeing when we drove past a few weeks ago. I remember seeing their home, another home, and like what appeared to be, a store. Obviously, it was boarded up, but it wasn't structured like an actual home. So I thought that was some type of business. And now that you're mentioning,
but it was on the same side of where the home was.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's wow. So what did they? So was it just a regular? Would you say a general feed store where they sold just various things?
No, it was kind of like a little neighborhood store where you could get bread and things like that. It was like a neighborhood store, candies and all kinds of that. But it wasn't a feed store or anything. It was just like a little general store, right in the neighborhood if you wanted to rush and pick up something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Some juice or milk or
juice and milk and eggs and stuff like that.
Okay. Oh, wow. Interesting. And how long was did they have that going?
I think it may have been going because when her mother was living, the store was still going, and I went away to college, so it was still going until her mother passed, and then after they passed, they changed and did a few things different, but the houses still stayed there, but the store closed because my brother was working with the Conway newspaper, and he
Mhm.
worked for that company,
Mm-hmm.
and so
Okay.
and she was still teaching.
Okay. Okay. As we go through each person, and if you want to recall moments with anyone, feel free to do so.
Okay.
So let me zoom out here, make sure I'm looking. Okay, so now here we are to Lucy. Okay.
Lucy,
Yes, ma'am.
your grandmother.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I knew more about Lucy because I was a little girl at the time, when they were teenagers and coming up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She was just a regular teenager,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so what the kids were doing at that time, but still under kind of a strict direction from the family.
Mm-hmm.
She always obeyed and never did anything that her parents did not approve of her doing or going or anything. In fact, all of them were that way.
Where Lucy's home is now, how far away was your parents' home or your family's home?
It wasn't very far.
Okay.
It wasn't very far. My father lived off the highway,
Okay.
and this home is on the highway, but it wasn't very far. You could see everything. At that time, people farmed a lot more, and you could just see everything. You could see for miles away,
Wow.
on other hills where people farmed a lot. But since then, people have left the farms and gone, and they've grown up, so you cannot see it. Wasn't very far. That's where my father's brother's place was.
Okay.
See, my father bought some land, and my brother bought land by him, and they built their home where Lucy lives now. And Lucy and C.L. bought their place after my uncle passed, and his wife wanted to move downtown Marlton,
Oh.
and so she wanted to sell their property to them, and they
Okay.
bought that property.
Okay. Okay.
And I think most of that at that time was torn down, but and rebuilt. But
Mhm.
when your Lucy and CL rebuild, they didn't it wasn't as many rooms, and it wasn't as large as it now. She's added on several things since they bought the property.
Okay. 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 And do you recall the name of the road where your family stayed, the dirt road off the main highway? Do you recall the name of it?
No,
by
it
chance?
wasn't. We didn't name the dirt road because we didn't live, I guess, in blocks. You would say we lived about 5 or 6 or 7 blocks off the highway, down a road.
Mm.
And at that time nobody lived down below us, but there was a road that we could take that went to Highway 9, but it was through the woods and all of that stuff. But
Mhm.
that was not a name of that road. It was just going down to our house.
So as the way it is now, there where Grandma's house is, there are trees situated,
Mhm.
and the grass is growing up, and you see the separations of people's property, whether people that reside there now or at least homes that are still upkept.
Mm-hmm.
So when they were farming, when that was a huge farming community, all that was pretty much cleared. You could see
All of that was cleared.
Wow.
And everything.
So that
In fact, you could see to the Spring Valley community, because parts of Spring Valley community, because parts of near where the Spring Valley Elementary School, it was kind of on a hill, and you could see things. You could see the lights of the train when the train came through down to Marlton at night. You could hear the roaring of the train and hear the bell ringing when when the train would come through at night and during the day too. But at night you could see the lights from where we live, because we only lived 4 miles away from town.
Okay.
And you could see the lights downtown and everything.
Okay. Spring Valley, was that where Grandma's house is? Was that north heading away from the town, or was it
Spring
west?
Valley?
Yes, ma'am.
That was a community that Theodore and Ruth lived in, and I would say it's kind of.
Oh, that was.
Yeah, that was.
Oh, wow.
That was called.
That was up on the hill.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, they were not on a hill.
Okay.
That whole community was called Spring Valley.
Okay.
But parts of it did not have hill. Some was just kind of low, and then some parts of it was kind of up on the hill and stuff. So.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so it was the landscape was so clear, you could see from Grandma's house, or from where you stayed, all the way down into town?
I couldn't see down into town, but I could see the lights at night.
Wow.
And I could hear the train and everything.
Oh man,
there was a lot of homes between that and where we live was not up on a hill, but you could there had a road that go right straight down there, and we could just hear all of that at night.
Oh wow, that's something else. Because for as long as I can remember, that's you driving there, and it's you can only see as far as from Grandma's house to maybe the next, obviously across the highway, or maybe diagonally further down, but not 2 or 3 lots away.
All that has grown up.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has grown up.
Mm-hmm. Do you recall? I think his name was Mr. Vaughn's. I think his name was E.C. Vaughn's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I know he was living for quite a. He was in his later years, but he was still very strong, still living very, adamantly, in his house up on the hill, just north past Hickory Hill, not too far.
Mm-hmm.
And we have pictures of him with Drea. I know when Drea was maybe a few years old, or either Shelby when she was just a little baby. But yeah, so he lived for a little while. So you recall him?
Oh yes, I recall him. I recall him when he was a much younger man, and he was married to a lady that lived in our community, but he was from another community, and they got married, and they lived in the other community for some time, and then later he moved near the Hickory Hill, down in that community. And so his first wife died, and then he married another lady, Elvira Roseborough, and that's when I think after they got married for a few years, then he moved up on the hill, because years ago when I was a little girl, they had named that place right up there where he lived, and they called it the Benny Royal Hill.
The Betty Royal?
Benny Royal Hill.
Okay.
And I guess he must have been a kind of outstanding man in the community. I never knew him, but I knew, some of his children. They were much older, and he had passed, and they named that the Benny Royal Hill.
Oh, wow.
But that was in the community. As I said, the Hickory Hill community had many little sections that they called. That was the Alden community.
Alvin? Mm-hmm. Okay, how would you?
Alden. Alden.
Okay.
Yeah, they named that part of that community the Alden. Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow. So Mr. Vaughn was him and his wife. They were. So when they were there, they were looked up on living in that area, huh?
Yeah, they were.
Okay.
He was a very nice, handsome young man, and he would always, with his first wife, Johnny Vaughn's, she was a Morris.
Okay.
Johnny Morris, and her father was I never remembered him, but my stepmother that my father married, uh, she was once my stepmother's stepdaughter.
Okay.
And after Mr. Morris died, and she, some years after he died, then she married my father, Willie, my stepmother, Willie Stewart.
Okay.
And he bought that property, and then that's where he lived when he and Elvira Roseboro, she was a Roseboro, lived.
Now, was she?
And that's where he lived until he passed.
Yes. I recall he his strong handshakes.
Oh yes.
He was thin framed and not physically tall, but he just had his presence was of great magnitude. Yeah. Oh wow.
And he had such a romantic voice, you know.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. And so you mentioned he married a Roseboro. Was that specifically the same last name as Ethel's husband?
Yes, they were. His wife and Ethel's husband were first cousins.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. And well, that was pretty cool to know. So let's move along.
Oh, let me tell you a little bit about the frog levee and the owl den.
Okay.
Now, in Frog Levee, there were a lot of people who lived in Frog Levee, but they lived on, I don't know what you call those people, some man downtown, Massey, had a big store, but he had lots of money, and they lived on his property.
Okay.
And what it was that there was never a settlement of their living on his property. If they, I guess they would pay him so much to live, but if they didn't have the money, that was all right. And then during the summer, when they didn't have money to live, they would go down to his store and he would furnish everything they could have. But in the fall, when they got ready to try to see how much they owe him or how they could get it, he said that was all right, but they owed him so much that they couldn't leave and go somewhere else because they owed him too much money. And he had a store, and he was a Massey. I don't know his real name, Massey. And this next community, in the same community, was that was called Alden. There was another man by the name of Dowdle, and it was the same type of kind of living that they lived on his farm.
Okay.
And they couldn't move because they couldn't, they owed him so much money. And that was a way of life in some places, like in Mississippi, you owed so much money, and the people used to try to move at night to get away, and if they find out where they are, they owe them so much money, they have to come back and stay on their land, because it was kind of like a slavery. Not a slavery, but I don't. But that's the way those two communities were. But my father owned his own property. He bought his own property, so we never had any to have to rent or anything like that. Now my father did rent some land to raise cotton and stuff and things like that, but what he and his landlord, the person that he rented from with cotton, it was down near the big creek in black land, and long rows of everything, and we had to have people to My father had to get people to help, to help harvest the land, and we get so many bales of cotton. And cotton was the main thing back there then. They'd take it to the gin and they'd take it downtown and they'd get about $200 or $300 a bale. But my father would give him every fourth bale. For instance, if we got, we made 12 bales of cotton, this man would get three bales of cotton out of it. So that was the way that he was never in debt with him, because that's the way that they worked. It worked him out. Worked it out.
Okay. Okay.
There were people white men who were big landowners and stuff, and they'd have people to come on their land and live and stuff. And a lot of the black people did not have. Their homes were not paid for. They did not have a mortgage on their homes. They just lived, and that's the way they lived.
Oh man! Wow.
There's a name for it, but I don't remember the name of it. That type of living.
Okay. That's very interesting to know about the. So that was, what was it? The community Frog Levy, you said?
Frog Levy.
Okay.
And Owl's Den.
Owl's Den. How's it Owl's Den? How is that spelled, if you recall?
OWLS.
Okay.
OWL''S and DEN.
Okay.
And this was Frog Levy.
Frog Levy and Owl's Den.
Mm-hmm.
Oh wow, wow. So very.
But the people on the ridge, depending on where they lived, they seem to have owned all of their property, or was buying it legally, or the way they should buy it. So, but it was just these two big men who had people on their land, and the people could never get away because they were always owing them something, and they could never repay.
Wow. The Ridge. Okay.
That was the Frog living out in. That was where Priscilla was raised on the ridge.
Okay. All right. Here we have Cynthia.
Oh. Cynthia, I think her calling was to be a nurse.
Okay.
Because as you can see on that picture, she's still trying to take care of her little brother that's in the front and make him be still to take that portrait. Cynthia was always the one that, that would come out and see about the sisters and brothers. In fact, she took my father, his last years he was living with her, and she took my brother Theodore for a while. He was living with her, before he was put in a home in Little Rock. And she would never want to go away and stay too long, take a trip on her own, because she thought somebody may need her, These other sisters and brothers had families and things, and they were living in. Her husband had died, my father had died, and her children had moved away, and all of her grandkids would come during the summer. All of them, she'd have 8, 9 sometimes, for keep them for a month and all of that.
I remember.
But she was afraid to go and visit her grand nieces and nephews, because she was afraid somebody needed her.
Okay.
One of the members of the family would need her. So that was, she was always the nurse, because she took care of Ethel for some time, and your mother, she'd come out there and see about her and stay a week. And I mean, your grandmother.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I remember on certain summers when we were at our grandmother's house, and then we would go to Yeah, and since she stayed in the Happy Bend community.
Yeah, Happy Bend community.
And
that
we
was
would,
in Adkins.
There would be so many of us, of her grandkids and us, just,
Yeah.
anywhere from 10 to 15 kids running around in the big yard and playing. And
yeah, that's it.
Oh, man. Those were, I remember her, she was also into, sports and football, and she would mention, this, Razorbacks or the Texas Aggies or this team and that team. And, oh, man.
Yeah, when she first married, she was a young lady, and she and her husband would, were very active in going to different things of the community and everything.
By the picture, at that moment, she's looking down at Elihu, and he's like, it's funny. He reminds me of when Trey was smaller.
Yeah.
Two's kid. He could not. You could not keep him still for nothing. So,
yeah, I think that was the way he was.
Okay, and how would you describe? I don't recall my mother mentioning, too much of Claude. Did he live for quite a while, or did he pass early, or?
Well, he passed at age 70.
Okay.
He passed after Lather. The Lather was the first sibling to pass. And he passed after she passed. He was 70. Now, he was behind. He was the next one in line behind Cullen.
Okay.
Yeah, and they kind of grew up together,
Okay.
Yeah, like Luce and Margie did.
Okay.
And Elihu and me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Claude and Cullen.
Yeah, I didn't know too much about him because when he was living at home, I don't remember too much about him. And then he moved to Kansas City, and that's where he was. And then during World War II, he went to the service, and that was during the time I was finishing high school and going to college. And I didn't see him anymore until after, I think I was the last year in college that he got out of the service. But he didn't know me, because when he saw me last, I was just a little girl, I guess 4 or 5, and now that I'm grown. So he didn't know me at first. He wanted to know who I was, and when I came up and spoke to him, he wanted to know who I was, and I told him who I was. I guess he was still expecting me to be a little girl, Sometimes you don't see people in a long time. That's where you think of them, how they looked the last time you saw them. And then he stayed around home for a little while with my father. And after then, he went back to Kansas City. And married, and that's where he died, in Kansas City, Missouri.
Alethea being Eugene and Langston's, that was their mother?
Yes, that was their mother.
Okay, so now did she eventually reside in Kansas City? Because I know a lot of the Parkers are.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
They moved. They were living. At the time they moved, there was a house down below your mother's, where you're living now. And it was like going downtown, going back toward Marlton.
Yes.
But there was a house there, and that house eventually burned.
Yes.
And that's where Eugene and Alethea were living when they moved to Kansas City.
Oh, the house that's just a few hundred yards away.
Yes.
Oh, that was, yeah, okay.
Yeah, I think they moved maybe 2 years after I'd finished college and married.
Okay.
They moved away, and they moved to Kansas City.
Okay. Yeah, I remember that when we were small.
Yeah, that was my grandmother's. I think that was my grandmother's home.
Okay.
And it was left to Aunt Geneva, and then you all bought that property from Aunt Geneva.
Oh man. Yeah, that. I remember Mom was telling me a little bit about that. You know how it used to be. Was it Alethea's home?
Yeah,
And
that's
then-
where they lived down
Okay.
there.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, that wasn't that far away. So I guess at that time, at least with your family, it seemed like quite a few, at least at a certain point, all stayed near each other.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, okay. And Elihu.
Yeah, he was a mischievous one. He and I we did a lot of little stuff together, I can remember, because all the others had moved away and had their families and stuff, and he and I were home for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I was still in junior high school when he was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember my dad was kind of sick at that time. Well, he wasn't sick, but, he was older and he couldn't do as much as he'd been doing. And so at that time, we didn't, out to Hickory Hill, we didn't have a high school to go to.
Mm-hmm.
So Elihu went to high school in Menifee, Arkansas, Conway County Training School. That's the name of the school.
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed from Monday through Friday with the family.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the families took high school girls and they stayed in their homes,
Mm-hmm.
And he stayed with the Woods for a while, down to Menifee. But during the spring, after things had gotten so warm and stuff, he got a bicycle, and he would leave about 4 o'clock in the morning, and he would ride that bicycle all the way to Menifee.
Mm.
Through the bottoms and the shortcuts and all of that way,
Oh, wow.
and go to school every day.
So,
And that's where he was going. When he finished high school, he was living at home, but he had a bicycle that he would travel to Menifee every day.
oh wow. This is Elihu.
Yeah, that was Elihu.
And so traveling to Menifee, that's kind of going slightly east or slightly southeast. Would you have to go down to Highway 64, or was there another?
Well,
road?
no, he never went through that way. He went down below our house over to number 9.
Okay.
And then from number 9, he would take something. He was never on 64.
Okay.
He would take the back streets and stuff.
Oh man. Because now 64 is a back street. So
Yes,
basically,
64 is a back
so
street.
those were some back streets then. Oh man.
Yeah.
So, how long did it take him to ride his bike to Menifee?
About 30 or 45 minutes.
Okay, well that's not
He
bad.
was going at full speed.
That's not bad at all.
Yeah.
That's not bad. Oh man. Oh man, that's interesting.
And after he finished high school, he had to go to the service.
Okay.
World War II.
And what year was around that time? It was.
And he was there during the VJ Day.
Okay.
And he was under MacArthur.
Okay.
And he was home during the time that they declared the VJ Day, but they had just sent him home because he got burned, but it wasn't anything serious. It was burned on his arm, but it did not burn deep. Something that happened during the war.
Okay, on the field, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he was a sergeant, so he was the one to give the commands and stuff.
Okay.
And he was home.
Oh wow! And he just got sent home. Man.
Yeah, he was sent home a little early.
Okay. Oh wow, that's something else. Yeah, I remember when we used to live across the street from Uncle Elihu, and his kids and grandkids would come and visit, and we would all either play in their yard or our yard, or back and forth, and we'd have to keep ourselves off the street if we were not on bicycles and so forth, you know. So, oh man, I remember he would always say that, you know, when you're wearing like either a new pair of shoes or a nice pair of shoes, he would say, you know, you have a good foot.
Yeah. But he was an artist.
Ma'am.
I said he was an artist, though. He had so much of his Uncle Springs in him.
Okay. His uncle, that being
My mother's brother.
Okay.
They were those fellows were all artists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could talk and talk to the boys. And I remember Uncle John, the one that raised Priscilla, he and Adela.
Mm-hmm.
My uncle Nancy's and Pearlie and them's grandfather. He used to talk to the boys because there was Cullen and Claude here, and there was Mervyn and Alvin here, and he'd get out just telling them about life. And boy, he was fussing and preaching to them. And I mean, you know, he was just talking to them, but to me it sounded like he was fussing and preaching. And Uncle Springs, they had a sense of humor and stuff, the things that they would say. And Uncle Springs was the same way. Oh, he was an artist and stuff, but you know, they had that fine arts, that side of life. Dad had the more of money and overseeing, but Mother had the more finer life, voice and speaking and all that stuff. So I guess we got some from both sides of it. As I grew up, I could see a lot what was in us from my father and what was in us from my mother. So I guess I got a lot of my mother's side because I love fine arts. I love plays and I love producing them and in them and everything else. But I like to dress the part of it and stuff that kind of way. Yeah, because I was around Uncle Springs more than the others. Uncle John died. I don't quite remember I remember seeing him, but I don't remember quite when he passed. I know when he passed, but he had that orator way of talking. Yeah, and Uncle Springs too. Oh, they could use that tongue, and Aunt Martha could use her tongue when she get. And I imagine my mother could too, but my mother died when I was 9 years old, and about half of that time she was sick. So, I didn't know too much about, that. But I know Aunt Martha could use her tongue, and I'm sure Mother could use her tongue, and they could use their tongue. I'm telling you. Mignon. And Charlene.
So,
oh boy.
So Uncle Springs. So that was your uncle?
Yeah, that was my mother's brother.
Okay, your mother's brother. Okay. And so
he loved the ladies.
Okay.
And he went with a lady for a long time, Miss Bell, that here in Marlton. But she finally got married, but she didn't marry him. He was never married. He liked a lot of people, and there was a Johnson lady that he liked, and we liked the whole family too. They were all good people. But he never got married. They chose somebody else.
Wow.
And there was Uncle Willis. He was a school teacher.
Uncle Willie.
Willis.
Uncle Willis. Was that also on
my mother's side?
Okay.
Yeah, he was a school teacher. He taught. He wrote poetry and everything. But he was married, but never had children.
Okay.
And he died because he was living with Theodore and Ruth at the time. He'd gotten an old man, and they had him, and they were living right down there at the house from your mama's house, right there. That's where they were living. And he passed there. They called it, he had the dropsy, they called it at that time, but it was just heart problems.
Dropsy?
Yeah, that's what they called it at that
Okay,
time. I think
okay.
when you had a heart problem,
Okay.
they called it the dropsy, because you know, so.
Okay.
Yeah, he passed.
All right.
Kind of sudden, like, you're expecting it, but.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
Just.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man.
But he was an artist. He used to write poems and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Oh, man. That's something else. Yeah, because I know occasionally.
And they were always, making, Uncle Springs made a hoe that you could use as a hoe, and you could take a part off it and use it as a rake, and you could take a part off of this and do other things with it, but he never got a pattern for that.
Oh, okay.
And that was during the time when people could, write in or get applications for patterns.
Okay.
For, to get patent something.
Yes.
You know, and if it became successful, you would have it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I don't know whether he sent in and they didn't approve of what, but, or he never did do it. But, they were more with the fine art hands and doing stuff like that. And Dad was more of an overseer with money and how to run things and that. But he was not musical, because I could barely hear my daddy sing a word.
Mm-hmm.
I think all the musical talent came from the Millers.
I'm guessing he probably never did any sort of sketches or drawings of his yard tool or garden tool. I mean, you said it was multifaceted. I mean, he could.
It was a multifaceted thing. No, never.
Oh, okay.
I never did. I was a little girl at that time, about 11 or 12 years old, and I wasn't thinking about anything like that.
Yeah, of course. We're gonna head to Margie. I think this is.
Mm-hmm. She was Miss Prissy.
Okay.
The Prissy one.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
There's one, always the Prissy one.
Mm-hmm.
She was the Miss Prissy one.
Okay. So.
Yeah, you know more about Marge than I did. She was with the Lynx, and she was, she talked, and she was with the Lynx, and she was with this, and she was with that, and she was always trying to get her nieces and nephews to meet people that could help them and get them along,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember we would her and Uncle Porter stayed in Little Rock,
just across the street from Elihu.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that was when they were earlier in their marriage, or?
Oh no, they built. I don't know where were they living. I don't remember after they got married where they were, but they bought the home that you all used to stay in right there across from Elihu. That was Marge's and Bruce's home.
Yes, because that used to be, because mom would say that was rented from Uncle Porter.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they moved.
And then they moved out to where they, out farther.
Mm-hmm. Not too far.
The University Hospital out in that area.
Yes, there's a neighborhood there.
Yeah, neighborhood there.
And that's where I recall going to. They had, at least in our eyes, they had a nice looking home. The upstairs, you walk in at the mid level, and you could go upstairs or downstairs. And we were, as kids, we were always like, just we were enamored with that.
Yeah.
Because it was carpet and different levels and this and that. So
it was an improvement. But when she had her home over there, it was hardwood floors, and she just had Carolyn and Sonny and hardwood floors, and I thought it was real nice. She kept it.
Mm-hmm. When we visit them, Uncle Porter, I remember him more so because he was more of the talker of the two, at least in my experience.
Yeah, the talker. Yeah, he was a talker. He was raised by his grandmother.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think he knows anything, but he didn't have a lot of people.
Oh, okay.
When they got married, the grandmother was old.
Oh, okay.
And she lived in Texarkana, and she came up and stayed with them a while.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they lived, I know. Before they bought that house, they lived down by Lido Inn, right down in there, not very far from, because I know I worked right down in there from Sean Nim's. I guess that's where their church is now, right down in there. And they lived on what did they live on? I'm trying to think, but it was kind of like in a project, but it wasn't just one of these old project that poor people come in any kind of way. It was a project, but it was a nice place. But I remember that now. Where was that? What street that was on? And they stayed there until they bought the house over there by Elihu.
Okay. Lido Inn.
Yeah, it was right up in there, Lido Inn, right in there. Duncan Chapel, I don't know. It was out going out. Later Roosevelt Road. They named something, so that was Marge's church, Duncan Chapel, at the time. She was active with that church.
Uncle Porter and Margie, they had Carolyn and Sonny. I remember she mentioned Sonny a few times. I don't recall. Did he pass?
You know Sonny, Big Bruce.
Oh, Bruce. Okay.
That's him.
Okay.
We called him Sonny all the time.
Okay, yes.
And that's
okay.
why I still think of him Sonny.
Okay. Yeah. So exactly. I'm just using Bruce. So.
Yeah, you use Bruce, but we called him growing up. We called him Sonny.
Yeah. Okay.
And I know a lot of times when I was going home from Arkansas State, I'd go by and pick them up and bring them up to the house, and when I go back, on the weekend, I come back to Little Rock and bring them back home. Yeah. So. And I think for a while, Margie was away in school in Olathe, when Olathe was living up there. She kept Carolyn and Sonny for a while.
Okay. And so
until her school was out, trying to help her.
Okay. So we're gonna make it down to
Me?
yours. Yes. So I'll just zoom in on here. And so as you were saying, when the family picture was taken in 1924, you were born several years afterwards?
I wasn't born I was born 1925. So
okay.
I may have been on the way.
Oh, okay.
When this was taken.
Okay.
But this, they didn't have another. They didn't have another portrait. This was the only one, and my picture was taken from a picture my mother and I had taken together. And I was sitting down by her chair, squatting down and sitting down by her chair. I may have been about 4 or 5 years old. It's about the same as Elihu was when we took that picture. But it was some years before my picture was placed on this. When we started our family reunions, I don't remember what year, and we made these cups. That was when they put my picture onto the picture.
I would imagine you being the baby of the family was, I guess at any given moment, everyone was sort of looking after you and
Yeah, they were. I was so small because Ethel and Euless, I was only 2 years old. So Ethel would come by and take me and keep me for a while, and then Roosevelt and Joe Willie downtown, I guess I was about 9 or 10.
Okay.
They would come and I'd stay with them. And then for Christmas time, they would send stuff out by Dad, for Santa Claus and all that. I was the baby.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I was the youngest.
Okay.
And I got to do a lot of stuff where I wasn't able to just really work like everybody.
Okay.
And so I got a chance to go and stay with somebody for a while.
So you were roughly around 8, 9, 10. How old was Ethel and some of the elders of the family at that moment when you were
8, 9, and 10. They were all of them were over there. All of them were maybe in their 30s.
Okay.
Early 30s.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Ellie, he's about almost 5 years older than me, and Margie was next. She was about 6 or 7 years, and Lucy,
Mm-hmm.
then Cynthia, and then the others, they were kind of up there, but all of us,
Mm-hmm.
and all of them, all of my siblings, let me see, I'm trying to say they lived. Aletha was the youngest one that passed.
Mm-hmm.
She was 66. No, Margie was the youngest. I think Margie passed at 61. Aletha passed at 66. Claude passed at 70. And I think Cullen passed at 84 or 85, right in there. And then your mother passed at 80.
Okay, my grandmother.
Cynthia, yeah, your grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia passed at 89. I mean, she passed at, her age was 89 when she passed, because I had this accident. I couldn't go to her funeral because I'd broken my leg.
Okay.
And all the others lived into their 90s.
Oh, wow.
I think that, I'm trying to think, I just can't think of it. He might have died at age 90 or 91. And then Roosevelt, he was next. Died at 92 or 93. He lived about a year or two older than Theodore.
Okay.
And then Lillian died at 94.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And Ethel died at 98.
Okay.
And Elihu died at 90. He had made his 90th birthday.
Mm-hmm. And that was back in, 2010, 2009 or something?
Yeah, when he died, I can't remember what time he died, but
Mm-hmm.
he was made 90 July the 21st, and he died. He was being buried September the 28th.
Yes.
Of that same year.
Yes.
So he made to 90.
And Lillian, I remember her children. There was Celeste and Velma, right?
Celeste, Velma, and Velma. Celeste, Velma, and Charlene.
Charlene. Okay. Yeah, I remember spending. My mother would take us over to Velma's house, and we'd spend time with. I think Charles and Lamont, or we'd spend time with her kids, and she's always on the phone with Celeste.
Yeah.
Talking about the sports. Celeste likes the Golden State Warriors and I believe the Lakers. I'm not quite sure, but she's always on the phone with them, and and I vaguely remember spending any time with Charlene.
No, Charlene died.
Charlene,
Charlene was 39 when she passed.
Okay.
Because they were going to Nancy's funeral.
Yes.
Got into
her and Imogene. Yeah.
And Elihu was taking them. I think there was Elihu and Lillian and Charlene were going. And I don't know who else was they were going. If they were going, I don't know whether Imogene was going with them or not, because most times she wouldn't.
Okay.
And they got into the, inside of Wichita, and they stopped there to get gas or something, and Charlene had an attack. And they couldn't survive her. Maybe if they could have gotten the people there quicker, but they couldn't survive her. So then from there, they stayed for the funeral, but they had to try to make arrangements for her to get back to Helena. I was going to come to Nancy's funeral, but the funeral was on the same day I was doing summer school, and I could not go because I couldn't get back, because I had a lot of stuff to do. So I I couldn't go.
And you were teaching at the time. You were teaching summer school in L.A. or
in Compton.
Compton. Okay, okay.
You know, during summer school time, if you made out an application for summer school and you were accepted, they would send you to any of the LA's, the Compton Unified School elementary schools, and you would a month and a half or something that you would, help the kids that needed help, that they suggested to come back to summer school.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So we've kind of gone through, at least we've kind of gone through, I'm going to pan back out, kind of gone through everyone in the family. And once again, this large, obviously I referenced the photograph and on the cup, and also, the photograph that was taken. That was my reference to do this large scale drawing, and this was part of a book, like a physical book that I had made, and that I physically had the guidance of my instructors and some classmates when I was in school as part of our thesis to put together a book, and we had our choice of subject matter or story was up to us, but physically the physical making of the book, because the whole theme of a book and a story, and so I know my mother, she helped gather for that book. She helped gather a lot of information. I believe you may not recall, she may have spoken to you about certain things here and there, or she may have been speaking with
she may have spoken with them,
Yeah, others.
Because I was blind at the time. I couldn't see her to do any research or anything.
Well, this was back in, this was late 90s. So I'm sure she's information that she had. I think it may have been just after, the semester after my grandmother passed. She passed in fall of 98. Fall of 97? Yeah, fall of 97.
I know how old she was, but I can't think of the year she passed.
It was fall of 97.
Now, yeah. I can think of Mama's, the day she passed.
Mm-hmm.
And the year she passed. But I cannot think of Dad the day he died. Mm-hmm. But I know the year he died.
Oh, okay.
And then I couldn't remember the year Lucy died. Mm-hmm. I don't remember the year Ethel died. Mm-hmm. And, they're the last ones. I don't remember the year Lillian died. Mm-hmm. But I know Cynthia, I know how old she was, but I can't remember. I know she died when she died because I had broken my leg, had this accident and broken my leg. And I couldn't go because, I couldn't, somebody would have to go with me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't able to go. And then Harmon was sick and he had just had surgery. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Gwen was sick too, and she was trying to take care of both of us, and then with Joseph. So I couldn't go.
Joseph.
He was an active little old fella.
But yeah, so this was back in spring of 98 when this book was, I think I may have approached her maybe in 97, and then it started in 98 or early 98. Mm-hmm. And so information that she had or that she recalled from my grandmother had passed by then, just with the season before, but whoever else was living at the moment. So she may have spoken with you about this and that and others, and
might have, but mm-hmm. I can't think of anything.
Yes.
Now I know when I go to the doctor, I have to take somebody with me.
Yes.
Because when the doctor gets through telling me this and that and all of this and that, when I get back here, I can't tell them. I can't tell them the name of stuff or anything. I used to, but I can't. So I just have to have somebody go with me now, and it's worse, and I know it. After pretty soon, I don't know if I live long enough, might not know my name, you know. But I know I'm getting toward that, and I know how it starts, and I'm getting toward that. But I guess as long as I know what's going on and what I'm doing and getting toward that, I guess I must be doing pretty well.
Very, very well. Very alive.
But just
alive
my
and well.
memory is going.
Yeah. So this book, this was for a school project, and so it was a really great book. It's going to be, and this whole interview that we're having literally right now, I guess you could say came about because I was in the trying to make a long, not too long, but make it short as possible. Several years ago, I did that large. I don't think I've even shown you, but I did a large, almost life-size self-portrait.
Oh, that face, that part of you with those blocks.
Not that one, but it was another one. That was a while ago. But one where my full body. Full body with that. I'm wearing a hat and a blazer and everything. And so I did that one spring a few years ago, and I happened to be back home, and the gallery director was mentioning a potential project with the government, actually. And so the representative had visited. I'd spoken with the director, and I showed her this piece that I'd done, and she's like, that would work perfectly with what this representative is looking for. So that project being in place, and then fast forward a few years later to like, as within this year, within this season, we were just planning to have a show is already set this summer. And so the director was noticing a shift in the generations. As each generation, their focus changes or needs to be refreshed. There is a generation where they're 50 plus and older who were more adept and more keen and more knowledgeable of in this case of visual arts and buying and purchasing and preserving, and then there's another generation where within maybe the low 50s to the high 30s where they're available, they're present within their mind, their finances and so forth, but they may not be aware. And then there's the generation coming up after them. So there is a shift of the mindset, or just a difference of mindset. So she was mentioning that, through that recognition, as she was noticing, it came about that there should be a sort of refresh, a meeting. In this case, and specifically at this gallery. So I will be. This is part of this lecture I'm putting together. Shall you say? And it's going to be. There's a group of collectors, potential collectors. Either they're aware or they're not aware, but they're available. Available meaning they're available and present, meaning that their lives are established and they're available to. They're comfortable with their lifestyles and with their careers and with their families, and their minds are potentially present to make acquisitions for artworks and learn about a whole new endeavor, so to speak. So, but that being that calls for a lecture of having to refresh or make new to them the awareness of visual art, in this case of within their so-called African American Black community. What are we documenting as what our race is known to be? What are we keeping? These pictures, these photographs, in this case these paintings, these artworks. So that being the most important things are the stories. So once again, this book and this painting was done back in school and so now it's being refreshed, and so it just happened to hit me not long ago. Like, it would be nice to interview you, so that way it gives, you know, the most esteemed relevance of who, where, what, when, and why when they're being approached about, you know, this artwork. So
I was just thinking, but I don't know. I was just thinking, you know, I'm on there. I'm a little girl, and all of my family's, you know, they're old and gone now, and I'm 94. I have a picture that I took about 3 years ago. And, you know, I have a picture of what I look like now.
Yes.
At age 94. That age. That just came to me. I didn't know whether you needed just a picture of what the last sibling looks like now. Yeah, that was just a thinking. I was thinking that.
And well, this whole interview is being documented, so it's on.
It was my white hair and all.
Everything looks nice. Your colors up against the white wall and the tablecloth, and your vivid colors in the glass with the fake flowers, but the colors, everything looks really nice. So we have this video documentation, and I do have that picture because I remember that was sent to me. I'm guessing the one that sent that? Or
yeah, but I think she sent all three of us, didn't she? Did she send everybody?
Yeah, there was one. I have the one with you,
just
the one
myself.
in Loretta, and then there's one with you by yourself.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay, well that's the one. I had one by myself with my hand up here, and the other one was just not with my hand up there. And then we took the 3 pictures together, you know. And I didn't know what the one was sent. I thought maybe she just sent the one with all 3 of us together. I didn't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the one, you know, they church, and I just think that was it, because we've never gotten that together, because we did at one time have a directory of all the members of the church and their names and their phone numbers. But they were just going to take the names, but they were saying at the time, if you want a family portrait, you know, you could do all of that stuff. Now, all of our pictures were taken free. That was about 2 years ago. Now, we haven't gotten it put together. I think it was just they were helping. That was helping to get pictures, and that was helping them too. Because when we got through, we were taking this and taking that. When we got through with all this little stuff, we got through. That was $700 and some. So I paid for it. Yeah. So, because the one I has a nice big size one, and Loretta has, but I don't. I just have the little small ones.
And so.
And a lot of families took, you know, portraits of their family and all that at that time. And if I had Mario and Mike and Joseph, I would have had the whole portrait, you know, wherever we right now, but didn't do it. I mean, they didn't come. I don't know what Mario was doing, and I don't know what Joseph was doing at that time.
But yes, so this I feel would be, and the director's not even aware that this interview is taking place and will be put together for that. But I feel this would be a great way to, as a reason to, you know, why do we want to document, you know, our lives and remember these things, is because these stories. So I think this is a great example, and this just happens to be of the family portrait, so it works. But it could be of you know, any subject matter within a painting, or in this case my work, you know, still life or landscape. But it would work for any other genre of art, you know, the stories behind it. So I think this would be these are actual, these connect with, we're interviewing, the person within the painting is being interviewed, and reliving, the lives and the moments of everyone in the picture. So I think that's a great reason for.
Yeah, and then there's showing one is still living.
Yes.
As of today.
Yes, and that would be a great. That would really bring to home to them of, okay, why do we need to?
Because if Elihu was living today,
Mm-hmm.
he would be I'm 94. He would be 99.
Okay.
And 95, he will be 100.
Okay.
So all of them would be over 100,
Mm-hmm.
all except me.
Okay.
And my mother died 84 years ago.
Mm.
Time just seemed to fly so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Because it doesn't seem as if I've been out of college 70 years, 71. It
Mhm.
does not seem that I've been out of college that long.
Mm-hmm.
And for Joseph, little old thing, it doesn't seem it's been 28 years ago.
Little old thing.
Yep. And Gwen's been dead 11 years. This year would be 12, and Harmon's been dead. It doesn't seem that long.
Mm.
Like numbers just go. Harmon will be dead this year. In June, he'll be dead 11 years. And Gwen will be dead 12.
Okay. So she passed a year or so before Uncle Harmon.
It was not quite a year. It was
Okay.
9 months or so, almost.
Okay.
Around 9 months. Harmon died after she passed.
Mm-hmm.
He was already sick, but
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
they didn't expect him to pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember.
But I thought he was doing better, and a little better. And we were just hoping that he could live to his 85th birthday.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought maybe he could live, but the day that man came out, and he works with all these kind of people, he said he might not live the rest of the week.
Mm.
But he'd been up and active and all of that stuff, and that day he had been active.
Mm-hmm.
And he was going home to talk to Mr. Williams. But, I just thought his mind something was happening to his brains, because he told me he was going home. And I said, well, who you going with? I'm going by myself, but I'm not coming back.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing about him, he would be on the phone at night, just an imitation phone. He'd be talking.
Mm-hmm.
And he'd be asking people if they are going to this funeral or going to that or going here and going there. And I guess they were answering him, and he was saying, somebody asked him whose funeral he was going to in El Dorado. He wanted to know if they were going to El Dorado.
Mm-hmm.
And talking out loud, and I was just listening and say, as long as he doesn't try to get out of the bed, because he tried to ease out of the bed. He was in a hospital bed and get over in my bed. Because he said that wasn't his bed, that was Michael's bed.
Okay.
And so the next morning, I would ask him. I said, you going home? Yeah. He realized what he was saying.
Yeah.
And I said, who you going with? He said, I'm going with Rudolph. And Rudolph had been dead 3 years. Rudolph Green.
Rudolph, was that a family member or a friend?
No, it was one of his, a fellow that grew up in El Dorado, and they went to college together, and he was, he died about 3 years ago. They were still good friends, and he was going with Rudolph.
Mm-hmm.
And Rudolph's had been dead about 2 or 3 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then when he told me he was going to El Dorado, I said, really? Yeah. I said, who you going with? He said, I'm going by myself. I said, he said, but I'm not coming back. I said, well, really? But I was just thinking his mind, his brain was kind of getting worse. But he was telling me the truth. He was up and around that evening, had a bath, and all of a sudden started getting restless. About dusk dark, he could not. He wanted to get out of the bed. He was trying to get out of the bed. Michael kind of helped him out of the bed, and that wasn't good for him. And he just said, I just feel different. I just feel funny, and he just couldn't be still. And so while I was trying to hold him in the bed and do around, and Michael called the doctor, and the doctor told him to give him some medication. But he told him to give him how many cc's to give him. And so Michael, he had this thing on his chest, and Michael put it in the little thing, and calmed him down. He went to sleep. But then the next evening, he left us. And so he said he was leaving from the spiritual world, the earthly world, going in. That's what this man told me, into the spiritual world. And in fact, this man gave me a little book, because he'd been working with these kind of people for the last 20 years. And the name of this little thing was Out of My Sight. And it started telling you about three months before he passes, things they start doing. And about 4 months, thing they start doing, and then they go to somewhere. Most of them, they go on a deep sleep somewhere during that time. And then they come out of it and doing fine. And then later on, they start, when you feed them, they start picking at the clothes and doing around 1 month before, his life will be ended and stuff. So it kind of made me understand, a little more about life.
Sure. And I never mentioned it to anyone, but I'm gonna scroll back, and I want to show you this picture, and it's pretty let's see, interesting here. It was actually a picture of, as I'm waiting for the bus, the group of people getting off the bus, and it was the first time when I rented a car. And as I turn around, a tall gentleman he looks just like Uncle Herman from the back. He's literally wearing everything that Uncle Herman would wear. His light colored slacks. I don't know if it was kind of like a short sleeve knitted shirt or a guayabera, and he had his hat on. He was literally wearing everything that. And I took a quick picture of it, and so here it is. It was this picture. Where
I see with a hat on, somebody's bending over like.
Yeah, like they're getting their bags, and so he's wearing the same. It's Uncle Herman would wear these hats like the Kangol, the straw. And he always wore the slacks and the short sleeve and his watch, and always just attentive to his presentation and stuff. So that was literally
I see that watch. I see that white thing around down there. I know that's where his arm kind of goes down.
Yes, and that was a group of people. They had their bags. They were just heading to the airport. But that was like the moment when. I thought that was pretty interesting. It was like, whoa. And he's tall too, just like him. So, but yeah, so that was, I just recalled that just now, but yeah, so thank you.
Yeah,
thank
but
you
it brought back something to me, which is a mystery. And they always say if you hear God, if you listen, you hear God, But I know it's not God's voice or anything. It's just something comes to you. Because I know when Harmon was real kind of sick, and Gwen had passed. Had Gwen passed? Yeah, and I had been up all night, haven't been trying to get out of the bed and stuff, and I was sleepy and tired and have to get up early the next morning while he's kind of sleeping and come in here and watch every few minutes because he'd be down there on the floor. He know how to, when he's trying to get up, but he knew he's falling, but he'd be on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hadn't slept, and that evening I was just so tired trying to fix some food for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it was just me. And all of a sudden, just like somebody spoke to me, and I guess it was God. He said, "You're gonna have a long life."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And from what that said, it just came to me.
Mm-hmm.
What that said, then I got okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then another time, these mystery things, I just don't know, is that I was coming from work one evening and coming home, thought my car was okay and everything, and I was on the Imperial Highway, and that's kind of a little rough place in there. And all of a sudden, I heard some blum 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 blum. It was about 3:00.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole big long thing under your car had come loose,
Mm-hmm.
fell down.
Mm-hmm.
And I got out, and here these two Mexican men came walking down the street.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, "What happened?" I said, "I don't know." He said, We'll help you get it." Because I was in the street, stopped right in the street.
Oh, in the middle.
So, yeah, so they helped me put it over to the side where cars could pass. There were no cars coming. And so while they were doing that, I know I had some money, and I was just, when they were doing that, I just opened my purse to get my money out.
Mm-hmm.
My car was over there, but I didn't see nobody.
Mm-hmm.
Not a person. And the next thing here, two girls come out of the little house there. They were young ladies, come out of the little house, two black ones, and they came down there and wanted to know what was wrong, and I was telling them, and I had my card, I had my card that I could have it towed. And they took me in their house, and they just took me like a grandma. And the girl called, and I got a place, and they came down and picked me up, and I got it on Rosecrans and what was it, Rosecrans, but it's near the freeway,
Mm-hmm.
and they charged me $80 some odd to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I got home at 7:30, and they had already called here to see if I had gotten home, but that's been a mystery to me. But I just opened my purse to just get them something, and I looked all around. I didn't see anybody.
Mm. Mm.
But I'm
That's
out of the
something
street.
else. That is something else.
Yeah.
Mm. Those are angels.
I guess it was.
Mm-hmm.
So, God works in mysterious ways, and he shows you miracles and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I really feel, that most of us have seen miracles, but we don't listen, and we don't think that's a miracle. And this is a miracle, I think, is when that little boy from Cuba, he was with his mother on that boat, and they were trying to get over to the United States, and everybody was killed and drowned except him.
Okay.
And
okay.
he's out in the ocean by himself late at night.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And all those dolphins around him, keeping him around him where nothing could protect him. I said, shoot, a big shark could have come under that and grabbed him up, but somebody rescued him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a miracle.
Mm-hmm. Very true.
That's a miracle. God shows us a lot of miracles.
Mm-hmm.
If we just listen enough and see.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's something else. Your car stops and
I don't know where they went. I don't know where in the world it went. I don't see it. I've been trying to think of this. There was one of my coworkers I used to work with, and I was in one of the 99-cent stores, and she came by, and I was just talking to her, and I said, "Well, have you heard from Merlene?" I said, well, she asked me about you. She said, "But now you see me."
Mm-hmm.
But then she went on about my business. But I think, from what I found out, she was already dead, and I'm talking to her in that just like it was no, evidently must nobody seen it but me. But they were just, I guess, and probably heard, nobody heard but me. I saw her. And I've been trying to think, was she dead at the time? She had an attack. Was she dead at the time? Because after she died a week or two, I said, I think I saw her the other day. And I said, miracles. Mario, I asked Mario, you asked Mario, it was a miracle. That he said, no, that was a miracle when he was a little boy working out here when we first came to Budlong. And he worked out in the valley. He worked out at Studio City. And I always give him money to get back, to get back home, change stuff. But I didn't have much money because I always give him a quarter. And that's what he had to do. He had to go somewhere and get pay 25 cents to catch his right bus. And so he had gone to work, and a lady, one of my friends next door, asked me if I would take her boyfriend to work. And I didn't know too much about everything, so I took him to Hollywood, but I heard about the place over there that I had never been. So I took him to Hollywood in that street, and I had started back home. I said, I'm going down this street so I could see Farmer's Market. That's what it was, Farmer's Market. See what Farmer's Market looked like. And as I stopped for a light, and I'm thinking Mario's working on his way home, there come Mario across the street. And I blew my horn, and he came, got in the car. He said, who sent you? I said, I don't know. I just saw you coming across the street. He said he made a mistake and got the wrong bus, and he calls himself from way over there, from Farmer's Market to walk home. And he thought he was on his way home the right way, and he was going towards Santa Monica.
The opposite way.
Yeah. And it just came to me, I'm going to go back this way to see Farmer's Market, see what it looks like in the front. And there he was coming across the street going the wrong way, and I'm thinking he's at home. But things happen. I see a lot of things that happen now, just that people might just take for granted. A lot of things I hear at church, and certain things that's being read and stuff, and I can see Trump all in them. That used to happen and things. I can. And every time I've been in a little tight, God always shows up and protect. Even when we first came out here, and one of Harmon's friends was over to my house, and he wanted to go home, and he and Harmon had been drinking, and Harmon went to sleep, and I couldn't wake him up, and he wanted to go home. It's about 10 o'clock at night, and it wasn't enough gas in the car to take him where he had to go home, but I was going to try to do it anyway, So I got over there, dropped him off on my way back, and here I ran out of gas. I had $1, and I was going to try to get to a filling station, but I couldn't. And who came by? A gang with the black rags on the head. And I had the kids in the car, and they stopped. And they wanted to know, is anything wrong? And I said, yeah, I ran out of gas. They said, we'll go get you some gas, because I had a can. And so they got the can, and they went. And I was trying to give them this $1. They wouldn't even take it. And these were gang members.
Yeah. Oh, man, that's something else. That is something else.
And one day I was taking Mario to work, hadn't paid no attention to my gas and stuff, taking Mario to work. It was a Sunday morning, and ran out of gas. Well, I had some money, but and this white man in a nice car drove up and asked what was wrong. I had the kids with me, And I told him I ran out of gas. I said I didn't even look to see because Harmon had my car. And I didn't look to see. He said, I got some gas in my car.
Mm-hmm.
He had a half tank of, in the back of his car, he had a 5-gallon tank of gas, but it was, gas can, but it was half full.
Mm-hmm.
He put some gas in it, and I tried to pay him, he wouldn't let me pay him. Because I saw a car one day, and I took them home. This was a station wagon. It was full of kids.
Okay.
And I'm behind this car, and all of a sudden the front thing blew out. One of the front tires blew out, and this car went over.
Flipped over?
I flipped over, but it was kind of on its side.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of slightly down in the ditch.
Mm-hmm.
And so I went to see what I could do. They didn't want to call the police because I think they must have been, they didn't have the right things to be in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
There was a grandma and a lady and 2 or 3 kids and a chest of ice and all that kind of stuff in there.
Mm.
So I went and helped them. They didn't want to go to no hospital. I said, I'll take you to the hospital. They didn't want to go to no hospital or anything. They just kind of wanted to go home. And the lady that was in charge driving the car, she was just going to try to wait. She had I think she had one of these things that you could call and have your car towed into somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I took all the others home. I know some of them were hurt. They didn't want to call no doctors and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
All that stuff.
Goose Tatum, you said, was from El Dorado?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
It was the one that was, Goose Tatum with the basketball thing and all those playing.
Yes.
And also when I was in high school, they've been around for a long time, but we had a boy from Plumerville that was going to high school at Menifee.
Mm-hmm.
And they picked him up, but I never knew what happened to that. They might have let him go. I never saw him play or anything. They just probably may have had him for the practice or stuff, or let him go or something. But they picked him up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So Uncle Herman knew of.
He knew all those people that growing
okay.
up and all that kind of stuff. But I a lot of them had gone and everything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And now I go back. We went this past, when we were there last year, we went to El Dorado for a whole day. I don't know any of the people. Most of the people now are coming from Louisiana, coming in there, and all the other people are dead that I know along with me, they're gone. And there's only one person that I can call that I know now, and she can't walk.
Mm-hmm.
We had to have a conversation on the phone. She was locked in a house because her daughter had gone to work. But, she's in a wheelchair, but she's doing pretty good. And her daughter was at work, and she couldn't come and open the door.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I was just going to run by to see a few minutes. So we just had our conversation on the phone.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And all the other people, that they're dead, and the place just doesn't look the same. It looks like a foreign place to me that I never lived for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And where we lived, all of that's been torn down and stuff. So, because what they do, if the houses and stuff get pretty bad, you don't fix them, the city will come out and burn them down.
Mm-hmm.
So that one was torn down, and if you tear it down yourself, it's much cheaper than if they have to come out and do it.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people's homes are gone, stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And all those people that ran around with, and if they're not there, they're gone. Most of them are dead.
Mm.
And so when I go home, there's nobody my age that's still living there.
In El Dorado.
None.
I remember we went down there 5 or 6 years ago. It was us, Tawana, Mama, and we went down there for something. Tawana the one that had some business to take care of or something, or something. But we were down there. We drove down there one summer when y'all came down. Yeah. So, but yeah, so that but yeah,
Yeah,
so.
but I thought she was. People were familiar to this lady, but I never knew her. But how I knew, how I knew the family and stuff.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I knew her. There used to be a lot of people in there, Laredo. It was a booming, nice little town. I really enjoyed living there. I just didn't like the way the white folks were down there, but I enjoyed living. We had 3 social and art clubs, the women clubs, and the Eastern Star was there, and a lot of stuff we had going on down there. And our church was a nice sized church at that time, and now when Mildred died, the one and I went, I guess it was about 1 or 2 people I knew. None. But one person. And it's just so small now and all of that. And then when we had her, she was planning on having it at Lee Chapel, but then they didn't have a pastor. And so she just called Pete, and he just got his pastor, Baptist man. And your mother, so Walter did the prayer, and your mother did something, and then one lady from down there did, she did the obituary. And it wasn't many people there. It was just us and Grace and Alfred and 1 or 2 people. The one that I called quite a bit, and she was there, and that was it. It was very small. Yeah, and then we took her down Free Union, where their family plot was. And there that was it. And then Ray came with them. It was Walter and Jack and Ray came down. And Pete, he had a funeral home. There was another one there too. He had a funeral home, but he was in charge, and he got the pastor there, their pastor. Now Pete's dead. Yeah, so he and Mildred was about the same age. And he knew her, and all that kind of came up together. Now he's gone. He's been gone over a year or so now. And so there's just one funeral home there. Everything is so different. All those nice stores that used to have around the square, most of it's nice little junk stuff, and Eat Place, and we had about 3 good stores: Coins and Elevator House, and another store people would come far and near buying clothes and stuff. No more. And it's growing, it's expanding out, outskirts. They don't have any place to eat too much. Only these little places. They had one, because we thought when we was there before, they had a cafeteria, and the one and I dressed to go to that cafeteria, went over there, and that cafeteria was gone. And we went to another place, and a fellow that served us, he was a black man, and he was down from Louisiana, didn't know anything about him. And it's just, I don't know, I just don't know anybody there anymore. And all the people I did know, they're gone, or either, most of them my age and around with us, they're dead. And others not living there anymore. So. And I think most of the ones that I knew from the community, all of them, they just, that one is still living, her age. All others are gone.
Oh man. Okay, well, thank you very much. If you need to get up and if you want to fix yourself some tea or something, or just take a break, this is.
No, I don't want nothing. You want some tea? There's some in there, or whatever you want to take.
I'm just gonna
I'm
get some.
gonna get you and Mario, you and Joseph want to go out, give you all some money to go out and have you a good dinner.
Okay.
But I